Hey folks, welcome back to The Sky Tonight, our weekly update where we cover the lovely star field above. And again, this is Seth Mayo. I'm the Curator of Astronomy for the Lohmann Planetarium. And for this week, we're covering May 25th through May 31st. So we are rounding out the month of May, inching ever closer to summertime in June. And it's amazing. We've covered so many weeks in this weekly program of The Sky Tonight, and hopefully you've been following along and enjoying all these celestial objects and these celestial events that we've been talking about. It's a lot of fun, and what's so great about it, when I hope to express to people, is how everyone can do this. Everyone can explore the sky on their own and learn about the universe. So let's continue to do that. And for this week, sunset is kind of in the 8:14 plus time frame, since our days are still getting longer as we head towards the summer solstice in mid to late June. So let's continue on. We will set the sun here, and as we do, you'll find it setting in the western horizon, as it usually does, as long as things are going correctly on Earth. That's how the sun sets. And one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the horizon, actually the ground, because this big digital tree is in my way for this next thing I want to show you. So let's just kind of move on, at least for now, without the ground. We have the power to turn off the ground if we want here in Stellarium. But one thing I just want to mention to you is we can finally start to retire, or at least say farewell for now, to the planet Venus. I've talked so much about Venus in these weekly programs, and that's great. Venus is such an awesome planet. It's bright, doesn't twinkle. It's just a really great thing to find. And hopefully many of you out there have found Venus on many evenings and nights, but there it is. So Venus is still there. It's getting very close to the sun, so it's getting pretty deep into the sun's glare as Venus moves around the sun in its orbit and getting harder to see. So I just want to mention it's still possible to see, but a lot more difficult now as we're getting later into May and into June. It starts to set or get too close to the sun. So keep that in mind. Anyway, we'll put the horizon back on. That's usually there too. And we'll continue to set the sun. Now, one thing I really want to talk about is the moon. The moon is great, and especially at the beginning of the week, here on Monday and even Tuesday, the moon is my favorite phase. And as you can see, and we'll zoom in a little bit more, but we'll leave a little bit of the sun's glow. That's always nice. But we'll zoom in, and you'll have a thin crescent phase. Really one of my favorite ways to look at the moon when it's this phase. It's a really cool shape. I think it looks neat. It's really good to look at through a telescope or binoculars, because when it's a lesser phase, lesser than the full moon, I mean, there are shadows that are cast through the craters and the mountains and the valleys, and those shadows can create sort of a 3D relief on the moon, almost like a textured appearance through binoculars or a telescope. It makes it really cool to see. So take advantage of that. And the other thing I love about a crescent moon, especially when it's really thin crescent, is you'll see a little bit of kind of this glow on the night side of the moon. Some folks in the past have described it as an ashen glow. I think that's kind of a cool way to explain this, or to explain what you're seeing. So what this is something called earth shine, which may sound a little funny. What does this have to do with Earth, right? And it actually makes quite a lot of sense. The Earth is a reflective body, just like the moon and other planets are. And the sun hits the Earth, and the Earth reflects the light back out into space. If the moon is the right phase and not too big and bright on the night side of the moon, if you're standing on the moon looking at Earth, the Earth would be a full Earth, just like a full moon. And that full Earth is really bright. It's like 50 times brighter than a full moon. That light is then cast onto the night side of the moon, and it makes it glow just a little bit that you see here. So that's called earth shine. And Leonardo da Vinci, back in the Renaissance period, he's the one who accurately, for the most part, explained this. He's the one that proposed that it must be Earth reflecting its light onto the moon. He originally thought it was the Earth's oceans that we're doing it. And it turns out that's not the case. Our oceans are not that reflective. The land actually reflects more than that. And even more than the land and oceans are the clouds. The white, billowy clouds in our sky have a very high albedo, which means they're very reflective, reflect the light back out into space and onto the moon, and that gives you that earth shine appearance. So if you can study the earth shine on the moon, it can help you to understand cloud cover content in earth skies. Kind of neat how that works, right? So earth shine is such a neat thing to see. Only during a thin crescent can you find it. At the beginning of this week is when that will occur. If you miss it this week, that's okay if you watch this video later in the week, because this will come around again since the moon goes around the earth every month. That's the nice thing about it, right? So you can wait for it next time, especially if the clouds or there's bad weather to block our view. So there's the moon. Now we can watch the moon through the rest of this week as it moves through the sky. And it starts out on Monday in the constellation Gemini twins. Right here, there's Pollux and Castor. There are the twins, one of the signs of the zodiac. As we move into Tuesday night and really Wednesday as well, it then slides into Cancer the Crab, a very dim constellation. I'll put up their pictures as well. And then as we move through Cancer into Thursday and Friday, that's when you'll see the moon will move into this sort of curve, like almost like a hook-like shape, and then the body of Leo the Lion, which we've spoken about in the past. Great spring constellation that we find there. And then by the end of the month, into the 29th, 30th, and 31st, as the moon moves through what's called first quarter, that's when it's half full. That's when it leaves Leo and eventually enters into a constellation called Virgo the Maiden. Those who are watching this closely know all of these characters or constellations from Greek mythology. They're all zodiac signs, right? And that might sound or seem a little funny that the moon moved through them, and it pretty much always does. So the zodiac signs come from the apparent path that the sun makes through the sky. It looks like the sun is moving through the stars. Of course, that's not the case, but it looks like that. And as that occurs, the sun looks like it's moving, and it moves through these, apparently moves through these constellations divided into 12 areas. What are the 12 signs of the zodiac? Now, the moon's orbit is not too different from the orbit of the Earth around the sun. It's off by a little bit, but since it's fairly close, the moon never strays too far from the zodiac sign. So it's always moving through them, or at least near them, as the month goes on. So you may notice that with our own moon. Anyway, so that's kind of through the week. You can see with the moon, we'll reset the moon back to the beginning of the week on Monday at the thin crescent with earth shine going on there. And as we slide around, one thing I just want to mention, we'll look towards the north, kind of did the long way, but that's okay. We'll move all the way this way here. And I just want to show you this time of year, it's still such a good time to find the Big and Little Dipper, especially the Big Dipper. Such a famous object here. So there's the handle and there's the bowl. Big Dipper is part of a constellation called Ursa Major, which means the Great Bear. And then we have the Little Dipper down here. The Little Dipper is called Ursa Minor, which means the Lesser Bear. These are part of bears in the sky. So the two dippers are actually not constellations by themselves. They're part of constellations, part of these bears from Greek mythology. And what's great about the Big Dipper, especially the big one, is the end of the bowl. So here again is the handle, 3 stars. Bowl is 4. The end of the bowl, these 2 stars right here, called the pointer stars, they kind of point you down to this star here. Really famous, really well known. Look what it's lined up with. Ta-da! That's the North Star. Also known, you can look at the top left here, as Polaris, because our North Pole points to that spot in the sky. And I can show it to you a little bit better by turning on a grid here. So if you make the Earth's kind of globe thrown into the stars a bit, if you think about it that way, you can kind of see how that would be like the northern point of the globe projected onto the stars. And you can have a grid system or a coordinate system, just like you have on Earth, kind of like a latitude and longitude in the sky, based off of this sort of grid here. There's an equator, the celestial equator, and there's a southern point that we can't really see because we're technically in the northern hemisphere. So if I speed up time here in the north, you'll see that the stars sort of move around the North Star in a counterclockwise motion, and that's because, again, our North Pole points there, and as Earth spins, it makes it seem like the stars are moving around the North Star in that direction, and the North Star basically just sits there. So that's why that looks the way it does through the night. That's why the North Star is the North Star. It's not perfectly in the northern spot, it's off by a little bit, but it's close enough where it works really well for the north. So it's a very, very good navigational tool to use that people have been using for a long time. So anyway, that's called the equatorial grid, is one way to describe that. Okay, as we are showing you that sort of motion of the stars as they look like they're moving around the North Star Polaris, I've already sped up time through the evening. We're now in like the 10 o'clock time frame. What's great is you're starting to see all these summertime stars, and just peeking in the southeast, see this kind of orangish, reddish looking star? That is called Antares, this giant star, possibly 800 times bigger than the sun, a red giant star. That's at the heart of something called Scorpius, the scorpion, or in this picture, the head. Depends on who draws the picture. So the moon will be near that at some point later on into June. Again, since Scorpius is a zodiac sign, as probably many of you know. Now, what I'm really excited about as well right now is, as we're getting a little bit later at night, we're having a better and better chance to see these planets that I've been mentioning in the mornings, but now it's starting to shift to the evening sky. If you look towards the southeast, not far from Scorpius, which looks like a big S, see these two things? Those are the planets Jupiter, which is the bigger and brighter one. It's the biggest planet, so it's not surprising in the solar system, and Saturn. So they'll look like non-twinkling stars rising out of the east, southeast towards the ocean, at least here in Daytona. And you'll find those not too late now. By the end of this month into June, you're starting to see it kind of shift into the nighttime sky or the evening sky. So that's nice to kind of watch those transition there. And as we continue to move through the night, actually now in the morning, we still have a little bit of time to wait for the planet Mars, the red planet in our solar system, rise. So you got to wait a little bit longer, but not too much longer. And then Mars will enter the evening sky, night sky, later in the summertime. So again, the planets have been great in the morning, kind of shifting to a different period of time for us, which is nice. And one last thing I just want to mention to you that we talked about last time, and that is the opportunity, if it doesn't break up or if it's not too close to the sun, to see a comet. Let's see if we can spot it. And if we can't, I can luckily search it. And last week I talked about a comet called Swan, or Comet Swan, which is really cool. Luckily I'm going to search for it, so we'll look for it. It's called 2020 F8 Swan. There you go. So I was looking a little too high in the sky. So there it is. Now Swan is a comet that as it's nearing the sun, it's brightening up. That's how comets work. They're usually very dim, and then they brighten up as their ices sublimate, as they vaporize and turn to a gas and envelop around the nucleus of the comet, and then a tail can form from the solar wind blowing the comet gas and dust away from the comet itself. And so we've had a lot of interesting opportunities to see comets this year. One broke up earlier. We have this one, possibly another one in the summertime called Neowise, but at least for now, if it hasn't broken up by this week, Comet Swan, you may have a chance to see it, but it's getting pretty close to the sun. It's in the northeast, so northeastern part of the sky. So it's pretty low in the west. It's below this, what looks like a big W, called Cassiopeia. And if you can see it, you may see the tail shape. I don't know if you can see it in here. Maybe reverse the time a little bit. There's a bit of a tail there. And it's closest to the sun on May 27th, on this Wednesday for this week. And so that's what's called perihelion, when it gets really close to the sun, within 40 million miles of the sun's surface. And by then it may break up because of the sun being very hot in a very energetic place. Or maybe it will survive and swing past the sun and still be visible after close passage, after perihelion. So we'll see. But that's something to maybe look out for if you're an early morning dweller. You look out to the northeast just above the rising sun in the morning. You may see a comet. If you have binoculars or a telescope, even better. But Comet Swan may still be a potential object to find in our sky. So good luck for that. And anyway, so with that, I will speed up time for sunrise here in the kind of 6 o'clock hour in the morning. And again, as usual, great way to end the program with sunrise. So hopefully you enjoyed another update of our sky. Again, thanks for following along, and I hope you get a chance to check out these things on your own sometime soon. So take care. Thanks for tuning in, and happy stargazing.